Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Shawn Purdy is brought to you by Compassion International. For $38 a month, you can help release a child from poverty. They do great work. Over 66 years of experience, Compassion has found the most effective way to care for children in need is through the local church. That's why they partner with more than 7,000 churches in 25 countries to deliver God's love and care to children in need. One child at a time. More than 2 million children are breaking the cycle of poverty for good. Compassion does it right. Here's the website. Go check it out for yourselves and pray about potentially releasing a child from poverty. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum. That's the website. Compassion.com/sports spectrum and consider sponsoring a child today. Today on the podcast, it's sort of a Father's Day edition of the show. We talked to Shawn Purdy. Now, Shawn is a former minor league baseball player, played collegiately at the University of Miami with the Hurricanes, and then drafted 4 times, in 1987 to Pittsburgh, 1989 to Kansas City, 1990 to the Oakland A's, and then 1991 to the Angels, where he would begin his professional baseball journey. And he would go throughout the 90s, basically, pitching professionally, all the way up to AAA in 1997 and 1998, before having to retire at the age of 29, never making it to the big leagues. Well, in many ways, Shawn is moving on from baseball to softball and football because he's a dad to 3 kids. His daughter, Whitney, is a softball player at Southeastern University. His son, Brock, is a quarterback at Iowa State, the Big 12 True Freshman of the Year last year, honorable mention All Big 12, 315 yards passing against Washington State in the Alamo Bowl. And then Shawn's other son, Chubba, is a stud 4-star high school quarterback recruit in Arizona, going on multiple recruiting trips right now, trying to figure out where he's going to play his college football next year. And he's going to play at a big-time school because he's a really good quarterback. So Shawn not only gets, in this podcast, it's such a fascinating interview because we get to talk about his professional sports journey. Of course, we talk about his faith testimony. And then what's it like now to be a dad raising 3 kids playing sports at a very elite level, on the college level. This was a fun interview. And to me personally, it's the perfect interview to have and to release here on Father's Day weekend. So enjoy this conversation with Shawn Purdy here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. It's an honor.
You're the first person in 300 and some episodes that's ever called me Mr. Romano. So Shawn, thank you for that. That made me feel a little old, but I also appreciate it.
Well, I was raised in the South, and that's how we do it.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Purdy, I'll call you right back. I appreciate you being here on the show, Shawn, seriously. And it's interesting looking at your journey through life, the hats that you've worn, the different hats, right? So the hat of certainly husband and father, baseball player, and now sort of father to, kids that play sports, I think is a real fascinating one. I want to start with your baseball hat that you wore, though, for a little bit as a baseball player. You played pro baseball for 8 seasons after getting drafted by the Angels in 1991, but it really goes back to high school for you and choosing to go to college at the University of Miami in Florida, Miami University, the U. So let's start there. Tell us about your time pitching for the Hurricanes and sort of where baseball was, in your journey as you were growing up.
Well, the ironic thing is I did play at a junior college, Indian River. Okay. And met a great man there, Coach Mike Easom. He really molded me into had a hand in molding me into the player and the person I came to be. Prior to that, I was pretty feisty, negative. So the ironic thing was I was pitching in a game there, and I had a really good game against one of the Dade junior colleges. And I went to get on the bus, And he says, "Hey, Shawn, University of Miami wants to talk to you." And I was like, "Me?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so they were like, and I tell the story so everyone knows that anything could happen at any moment. They were like, "Hey, we were here to see another gentleman play on this team over here, saw you, and we want to give you his scholarship."
Wow.
And so that's how I got to Miami. I had other, LSU and all those guys, but that's how the Miami thing came about. So, I went in there and had a couple great years there and played on some really good teams, played with some great ball players. And at the time, that was Miami's team. There wasn't the Marlins.
Yeah.
And so it was an exciting time for me as a young teenager, I guess.
As I was looking through your resume a little bit, I noticed a few things. Number one, you were drafted 4 times, if I'm doing my math correctly. So you were selected. I didn't even know there was 46 rounds. This is a sports guy. I worked at ESPN for many years. You were selected in the 46th round in the 1987 draft by the Pirates, the 44th round in the 89 draft by the Royals, the 26th round in the 1990 draft by Oakland, and then the 16th round in 91 by the Angels. I know how this works based upon going back and trying to improve your draft position, but why not go pro during any of those other years, specifically with Pittsburgh, Kansas City, or Oakland in those times that you were drafted?
Well, the first year I was sort of in limbo. I was lost, and I didn't know if I wanted to go to college anymore. And I actually walked on to a Pittsburgh tryout.
Is that right?
And got drafted. Yeah, and thank God he was very upfront with me, and he was like, "Shawn, go to school." He says, I see a bright future in you. We would love to have you, but he goes, "Go to school." And he was right because there was a guy at our high school that was a fullback for Auburn at the time. His name was Brett Fullwood. And, I went and we saw him play in a bowl game at a Citrus Bowl. I think he finished 5th in the Heisman and all the hype around that. I was like, man, this is what I want, And so got my grades in line and all that kind of stuff and just got really serious about college and in ball. And because I came from a high school, this was another junior college at the time. And I came from a high school that was all about discipline and hard work. And it sort of felt like I took a step down and I was like, wow, this is what it's all about, man. This ain't me, And so, God took me down a long, long road, but an amazing road that helped me grow with every stop along the way.
Yeah, the stop and the journey is quite interesting because you pitched throughout the minor league systems. You moved up from the ranks of single A to double A to triple A, like so many pitchers do and are currently doing, but you never made it to the big leagues. I would love to know kind of where you assess your pro baseball career as you look back now 20 plus years, what those years were like for you going through that minor league journey to try and achieve that MLB dream.
Well, I had 2 injury setbacks. And so, I was always doing really well. I was always, high up as far as the pecking order went and so on. And so with the Angels, I had a setback. And then I started, once that arm finally came back around, I started doing really well again. And then I was picked up in the Rule 5 draft by the Giants. Was doing really well with them. And, I had a 20 inning scoreless streak going and, they sent in Dick Tidrow and, I was in AAA with the Giants at the time and all the guys were like, "Shawn, you're out of here, man."
Wow.
And I was like, good Lord, man, they may be right. And, the next day Giants trade like 4 of our guys for Danny Darwin, Wilson Alvarez, and some other guy. And I was like, well, that was a wrap on that. And so then I go to the Atlanta Braves as a free agent because in the minors, I think they own you 5-6 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that time was up. And when I went with the Braves, I was doing really well. And there was talk of me going up. John Rocker had just gone up.
Yep.
And my agent called me and he says, I think you're out of here in a couple of days. And I was like, well, you know what? I think I hurt my arm last night. And just felt a little something on a pitch. And so they, did the cortisone shot and the whole thing. Nothing took. And when I came home, I have a business that I just started. I just had my first child. And I was like, you know what? Time to be a big league dad. And that's the path I chose. And I don't regret it.
It's interesting because your last year, as I was reading, you were just 29, right? So you weren't even 30 years old yet. You pitched 16 games that year and had a sub-2 ERA. So was it hard to kind of walk away at that point, just short of the big leagues, especially – the layman person might think, wow, retiring at 29, that's so young. But really in baseball terms, that's kind of the sort of, for lack of a better word, Mendoza line of whether you're going to get there or not, that 30 years.
He was one of my coaches, by the way.
Mendoza, was he really?
Yeah. So,
well, the cliche was perfect for this. But I guess was that hard for you at that 29 to almost 30-year-old age to say goodbye to this game that you played for, I imagine, for a long time?
I rehabbed that whole off season, okay? And my business really started to take off. And so, and that wasn't until the end there. My agent called and had me lined up with some teams. And I said, you know what? I think I'm done. And, so back then, 29 was old.
Yeah.
And now you see guys, they're popping in late. So, age, really isn't an issue anymore. But no, I had no regrets because I've been blessed for my children to run into people that I played with, people I played against, or a coach that coached me. And they'll go, man, your dad, man, he came hard. He gave it his all. And so, I'm always preaching to people, have no regrets, give it your all, and you're going to sleep well.
That's awesome. That's good advice. Yeah, that's good advice. We haven't really talked about your faith journey yet. You've alluded to God, and certainly we know that your faith is important to you and your family, and we'll talk about your family in a second. But tell us about your testimony, your journey to faith in Christ, and kind of when that took shape and when you made Jesus Lord.
Well, growing up as a kid, I had these magnificent neighbors. They were always working on us. This is growing up in Florida. And so they would take me to church, and I would go with my mom as well. And I think I was probably 9th or 10th grade. I accepted Christ. I got baptized and, from there forward. But I remember as a kid when I did it, sort of feeling embarrassed about it, everyone that was there was like, yeah, right, man, and so that bothered me for quite some time. But, even going through rest of high school and college, God's tapping me on the shoulder. Hey, man, you need to get right. And, like we all do. Yeah, well, when I'm ready, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so when I got I met my wife, and my father-in-law was like, sure, you have my blessings, but I need you to raise my grandchildren in a Christian home. That's part of the deal. And I was like, absolutely. And so it was in 1995. I'm in Shreveport, Louisiana. And, you're always praying. And to be honest with you, I would pray about turning things over to the Lord. And I would never talk about baseball because I was always worried about what if baseball is not in the plans.
Right.
And so I had 2 weeks of just total struggle. I'm getting killed. I've had bad games before, but just not that consistent. And it was the month of July, and I just gotten married that off season. And I got down on my knees, the right hand end of the bed, and I said, Lord, I'm done. I'm all yours. I said, I give you my life, my wife, my career. I'm ready to be a garbage man tomorrow if that's what you got planned for me. And so I finally let it all go. And I didn't see flashing lights or anything. I just felt it. And, within a couple of weeks, guys were like, dude, what's up with you? As far as my language, it changed. I was able to hear things coming and hold on to it, where before, you do your New Year's resolution and that just never happens.
Yeah.
And so I was able to start really gain control over things in my life, not me, but God. And from there forward, man, I was all in. So.
And you talked about becoming a dad and even talking to your father-in-law in terms of raising those kids in a Christian home, his grandkids. But looking back now, how important was it for you and has it been for you to keep Christ a priority as you've raised 3 kids who are really doing well in the sports world? And we'll talk about their success in a second. But just how important was that for you as, the pull of the world comes to keep them grounded in their faith?
Well, it's been something that was never brought to them late. It was from the get-go.
Yeah.
Every day. And, it wasn't this overbearing Christian family. It was living it in front of them. And I use this word with emphasis, communicate it with them, not tell it to them,
right.
Communicate it with them. And explain, every day, something we're seeing on TV or whatever, explaining it. And, they just, it just became natural for them. It was not a job or scare tactic or anything. And actually the first one that came to me, I have a hot tub business and I'm on the road selling hot tubs, and Chubba was with me. And I think he was 8 or 9, and he just came in crying. And says, Dad, I don't want to go to the devil. He goes, I want to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And explained what we were doing. And, he accepted Christ, and then he told his brothers and sisters. And within a couple week, they asked me, and we did it. And I was blessed to baptize them. Yeah. All 3 of them. And a guy that was there with us, Ted Barrett, Major League umpire.
I know Ted.
Ted was there, and what a special day for us, man.
That's amazing. So, and Chubba's your youngest, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you have, let's go through it real quick. And for those that might not know, your daughter, Whitney, is the oldest, right?
Yes, sir.
Playing softball at Southeastern University right now. Then your middle son, Brock, is playing quarterback at Iowa State. And your youngest, Chubba, is an Arizona high school quarterback. I'll call him a stud quarterback. He's being recruited highly right now as he's figuring out his future. And it's interesting to me, that story, by the way, is amazing, but it's interesting that it's your youngest that comes to you first out of the 3 and then influences the older kids in the family. That's fascinating to me.
Well, it wasn't something that had to be taught to them. There was nobody that was advanced more than the other. It was just something grabbed a hold of Chubba and said, hey, I'm ready to do this. I understand this. And then the other ones, Dad, I'm ready. And it was authentic, and they knew what it was. And the 3 of them, as a parent, through their whole young adolescence, man, they've been walking it. And it has just been, I'm like, Lord, how do I deserve this? It's just been amazing. I'm so proud of them. More than any sports or anything. Yeah. Their walk with Christ has been what I'm most proud of.
That's awesome. Shawn Purdy is our guest here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Let's brag on each kid for a minute. This will be easy for you. They're your children, obviously. But your oldest, Whitney, is playing softball at Southeastern University. I actually heard in an interview, I think it was with Brock, that he said she's the best athlete in the entire family. So tell us about Whitney a little bit.
Well, Whitney, first of all, she's the sweetest girl ever. And her brothers adore her.
That's great.
And all 3 of them are very close. Once again, it is authentic.
Yeah.
And she started off in dance, but at the same time, always throwing with the boys in the backyard, football, baseball, basketball, all the above. And Brock was in Little League and had this amazing game, and they won. They came back and won, and Whitney had just rolled in from dance class, and she's running out on the field. She's like, "Dad, that was so awesome." And I said, "Well, how would you like to be a part of something like this?" She goes, "What do you mean, play softball?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Yes, that's what I want to do." So we walked up in the stands and we gave Mom the cut across the throat sign. We're done with dance. We're going to play softball. And she just went right into it naturally. And what Brock was talking about is the way that she throws. She throws just like Brock would or Chubba would. And it's a real beautiful thing to see. And always through their football games at halftime, Whitney would go down and chuck a football.
Yeah.
And everybody would be like, "Oh my God, look at that girl throwing a football." So she plays shortstop. She turns double plays like a dude would. And they're very, very proud of their sister. And she did the JUCO route to Southeastern University route and has learned so much along the way.
Is there an interesting first of all, there's always going to be an interesting connection with a dad to a daughter. I have a daughter. We only have one child, so I only know girls. I was one of 3 boys, so I know what that was like growing up. But there's a connection, obviously, with a dad to a daughter, but a dad to a daughter who's playing a similar sport to what dad played. So is there a unique connection there? Whereas, and you may have played high school football for all I know, but you played professional baseball, so you're known for throwing and hitting and some of the things that you could teach and pass on to her. So that must have brought a unique connection there.
Yeah, we are very, very close. And once I got the boys up and rolling, and then it was time for club baseball for them, I got into the softball world, which I would never go back to the baseball world. Girls softball is just so fun.
I agree.
So I was her club coach for, I think, 4 years. I helped another guy prior to that. And very tight with Whitney. And it was, now when she comes home at the end of the season, we work out together and train together. And we talk all the time. And I tell any guy that, you're blessed to have a daughter because it's a very unique thing.
Absolutely.
A father is so important to women.
Mm-hmm. You could not have said it better. I completely agree. And I love hearing that about Whitney. Let's talk about Brock. Brock's playing college ball right now at Iowa State. Just came off a very successful freshman season and now going into his sophomore year. Tell us about Brock. He's your first son, and just kind of the development of his skills to come to the point where he's playing with Iowa State and succeeding at a very high level.
Yeah, Brock, we're very proud of him. We're very proud of his process where he taught us all. As we're going through his recruiting process, he was very successful in high school and nothing was happening and everybody's panicking, fans, friends, family, and Brock never wavered. He was always in there's interviews where he talks about his faith and, he said, God knows where he wants me. And, he'd come home from school and walk in the kitchen and, and Mom and Dad are like, "Well, who'd you hear from?" And this and that. And calmly he's like, "Oh, nobody." And, we're pulling our hair out. So he taught everything that we taught him. He taught it back to us. And how he never wavered in his faith for 1 second. And, he told me when he was younger that when Tim Tebow won the Heisman, he said, "Dad, given the opportunity, I want to use my platform one day." And he says, "I'm always going to praise God for it. Thank you and Mom and Dad, and for Tim Tebow being such a good role model to me."
That's awesome.
And so he's been doing it. The football's been great. What a blessing. We're still pinching ourselves about what has unfolded there.
Yeah.
But what I've seen most is him being involved with FCA and taking a kid fishing. And I was like, man, could you imagine if Tim Tebow took you fishing, what that would have done for your life?
Oh yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, you're doing it. And he'll tell me about some people that he's shared with and so on. And I just tell him, son, I don't even have the words to tell him how proud I am of how he's living his life and the people he's impacting.
That's so cool. Now tell me about the recruiting process. We're going to talk about Chubba in a second, but just what that world is like. I don't know if you ever really went through that, just describing your journey as a baseball player and how Miami found you, in essence, in watching there and happened to be scouting that day. But that football recruiting process is a little bit different from high school to college. You're in it now with your son Chubba, but what was that like with Brock, and what are some of the lessons that maybe you learned going through his process that helps you kind of prepare now as you go through the same journey with Chubba?
Well, I always encourage people, that ask, I'm like, be honest with who you are.
Yeah.
Understand who you really are. Are you D1? Are you JUCO, D2? And with our daughter, we knew Whitney is JUCO material at the moment. Okay.
Right.
And so we knew that through that for Whitney, it would help her grow as a student, as a player, on the field, off the field, and then she would be ready to go on to a four-year school. So in the recruiting process, I always encourage people to know who you are. We knew the size of Brock's heart and the size of his intentions and determination, but everyone else had an issue with his size. And so it was frustrating because we're like, you talk about film, we're like, hey man, look at the film,
Yeah.
And so, they always go with measurables where, things like that are changing now with, Kyler Murray, the guy from Oklahoma, that feels so disrespectful saying the guy from Oklahoma.
Kyler Murray. You're right.
No, the other one.
I know who you're talking about. Cleveland Browns. Baker Mayfield.
Yes, Baker Mayfield. Absolutely. So, and if he hears this, please forgive me. But through the recruiting process, we learned a lot about Brock, and it's all about being seen. I tell people, take your product to the people, meaning go to the schools.
Yeah.
And be realistic, dream big, but also cover your other bases, and so on. So, that was with Brock. We were blessed that, they did find him. And when Iowa State found him, they created a bond with him that was impenetrable by anybody. And, and Brock is a people person. So he was investing himself in the people that he was dealing with. And he's not about the fluff and the bling and all that kind of stuff. And he's about the high school he went to. They'd never done anything. And when we were picking high schools, I was like, man, are you sure you want to go there? And as humble as possible, he's like, no, Dad, we'll go there and turn it around. And I was like, all right. And he did. He took him to the semis. He took him to state. And so he wanted to be a part of something special like that at Iowa State.
Yeah.
And so that's how he got there.
Well, just to give our listeners a little glimpse on what his rookie year was like, or his freshman year, I should say, he won Big 12 True Freshman of the Year by ESPN. And that's a really interesting award because true freshmen don't usually start at quarterback in college, especially major college Division I. And then you go to the Alamo Bowl and he tosses a bowl record 315 yards for Iowa State against Washington State in a very exciting game. What was it like to watch that progression to the point? Listen, it's one thing to make, to get on the team and to be recruited and to, just be a part of a program, but then to do what he did as a freshman and be able to play and kind of, probably exceed anybody's expectations at that point, because like I said, most true freshmen aren't playing on a regular basis, at least in a quarterback position in college.
Well, he respected the process. You know, he's like, okay, I'm probably going to be a redshirt freshman. And I'm in a red shirt, so, I just want to gather up the information of this offense and pick Kyle Kemp's brain and this and that and so on. And, the two words that I live by with this family, and I'll tell you in a second.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I get it, because Mom would always say, so what do they think? Do you think you got a chance? He's like, Mom, I'm probably going to redshirt. And she's like, and I said, son, I respect that you're respecting the process, but I said, every time you step on the field, third string, fourth string, fifth string, whatever it is, go command the field, make the players around you better. And I said, because you never know what's going to happen. Yeah. And so I've always told my kids two words: be ready. And so don't get caught up in, my time's not now, and you drop things down into low gear. Be ready at all times. So he prepared himself, and when he was called upon, it was funny because during the Oklahoma game, he was supposed to get in. And so we went to that game, and he didn't. And I told my wife, I was like, man, look at him pacing those sidelines. He's never been in this position before. He's always been a starter. Yeah. And I go, and she's like, oh, my God, he's going to be so bummed. I said, nah, man, I hope he doesn't get in. Because I said, he's like a caged lion right now. And I said, so when he does get the call, whenever it is, he'll be ready to go. And then when he went in to his first game, we weren't at it. We were at home, but we were just beside ourselves, man.
I love it. I love it. And now you got Chubba. By the way, Chubba, that name might be the coolest name around. So you got to explain the name Chubba first, because he's being recruited all over the country this year. If you're on social media and you follow Shawn or Chubba's pages, you see that he's getting these amazing opportunities to be recruited by really high quality schools and places that you would watch every Saturday during the college football season. Tell us, first of all, where that name Chubba comes from, and then what that's been like to watch him do so well.
Well, when he was one, he was just gigantic. He was 25 to 30-something pounds, and, always drinking his milk. And, so I just called him Chubba, and.
What is his real name?
Preston.
Preston.
And he won't answer to it. It's Chubba. It's, when he played football, baseball, it would say Seep, letter C, Purdy. At school, the teachers were like, what? And you're like, trust me, you got to call him Chubba, or he's not going to answer. And we were at the airport one time. He was little. And I said, hey, Chubba, blah, blah. And this lady goes, excuse me, thinking I'm being abusive. And she's like, his name is not Chubba. I go, hey, Chubba. He goes, what? I go, there you go. His name's Chubba. So he's Chubba. Friends, family, teachers, sports. And, that's, in fact, he says when it's legal, he wants to change it to Chubba.
That's awesome. So I will never call that kid Preston if we ever have him here on the podcast. But
exactly.
What's that been like to watch him go through his journey? He's going into his senior year now, correct?
Yes, sir.
So he's a 4-star recruit, which means he's a really good, highly touted, we'll say, quarterback prospect. And going through this process of recruiting, I don't believe he's made his decision yet. Am I right on that?
No.
So what has this been like? And what has this been like for you to kind of go through it again with Chubba like you went through with Brock?
Well, the big thing was when he was younger, I was always trying to tell him, son, you are just as good as Brock, because that's all you ever heard.
Yeah.
And, and I said, just, you got to give it your all and invest yourself, and, you'll see. And, once he became a freshman in high school, he really, had some great coaches, good confident builders, and he started becoming his own. And then he got to watch his brother and be on varsity with him and learn Brock's preparation, film room, weights, the whole deal. And then this year, when he took over, he just hit the ground running. And I've been very proud of him and told him, I don't care if you're a junior, you become a leader. You make people better around you. In fact, he learned that as a freshman. He had a kid that kept dropping the ball, and, Chubba was frustrated. And I said, well, you go up to him and you pat him on the butt and you tell him, you got this, and I'm going to keep coming to you. And by the end of the year, that guy was his best receiver.
Yeah.
And so he learned there. And so he's very supportive of his teammates, as was his brother. And, he's taken on the responsibility of being the leader. And just like Brock, he loves the game. He's been waiting for this. Right. And he hates to lose. Absolutely hates to lose, both of them. and I'm very proud of that.
Can you give me a glimpse 5 years ago of what your and your wife's life is like with 3 kids, say between the ages of, 12 and 17 or whatever it might be, and just trying to navigate all of the sports going on and kind of what life is like in that moment? Because now it's different. Obviously, you have 2 in college. It's just really, Chubba in his last year getting ready to go to college. But I have to imagine the word chaos comes to mind when I think about how you might have been trying to navigate 3 kids in sports at the same time.
Well, it's what we signed up for. People ask us, oh, my God, you're going to have to fly here and fly there. We're like, you know what? This is a small moment in time.
Yeah.
My kids have been sitting on coffee tables and watching college sports on TV, and now we're there. And this is what we signed up for. So we're going to do the best we can. We're going to enjoy it. It's not a job. It's an honor. And as far as them at the younger stages, we never got crazy with club this, club that, travel here, travel there. It was all about logistics. My kids played Little League without club. And because I feel Little League is the most important time of your life, yes, especially for the community. You're playing with your buddies. And if you're not playing, you go watch your buddies play. And the Little League World Series was always a dream of my kids, as it was mine.
Yeah.
And so we always kept that in perspective. And, since then, I've seen a lot of people burn out that were amazing athletes when they were young. And so it gave us a lot. We passed on several all-star games to go camping in Colorado and fishing, Yeah. So that is what was important to us. But my kids knew that when it was time, to work hard and be ready, because these other kids, they've been playing this and playing that. But I felt that when football season was over, my boys were excited that baseball was here, where other guys were like, oh, man, they got more baseball, And then when baseball was over, they were excited football was here. Yeah. And so they never lost their love for what they were doing. Plus, you got to give them rest. So at that young age, we never were really crazy like a lot of people. So it keeps your kids fresh. They still have their youth, and you're still, as a family, doing family stuff, because that is so, so important.
This has been great talking to Shawn Purdy here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Shawn, last question, and we really appreciate your time joining us here. I love the stories, and I think everybody listening is going to be following the Purdy family as they continue over the next few years and see where God takes you guys at that point. But where is God taking you now? What are you learning from the Lord today in the season of life that he has you in right now?
Well, let me tell you, as you said that, both of my legs have goosebumps. Everybody tells you how to hate recruiting, can't wait till recruiting's over, blah, blah, blah. But what recruiting for me has been able to do is create unbelievable relationships.
Yeah.
I'm very authentic when I talk to these coaches and people on staff. When we go, it's like, hey, here's the Purdys, not the football players.
Yeah.
This is us. And, we're always honored to be offered scholarship and opportunities. And I'll tell you, this morning, I spent 37 minutes on the phone with somebody I just met on the past trip, the 5 places we went to, talking about Proverbs 3, 5, 6.
Yeah.
3, 5, and 6.
It's my life verse.
he sent me this morning.
Wow.
Because when I was talking, oh my gosh, just trying to get clarity and all this stuff, and him and I are talking, and his story is amazing, how he beat cancer and all this kind of stuff, and how he came to know the Lord. And so it wasn't a recruiting thing that he's taking advantage of my faith. It's authentic. And I met so many other guys at other stops, and that's the stuff that I love. And so I just texted Brock this morning, use your platform, continue to use your platform. And that goes for mom and dad also. And so the recruiting process has given me the opportunity to not be abrasive, but just create opportunity and relationships and see where it goes. And there were several guys that I'm like, they're like, all right, the recruiting trip's over. I'm like, all right, get in the car. You're coming home with me. A couple of guys that I met, and I still talk to guys that I met in Brock's recruiting process.
Wow.
And that's the stuff that I love.
That's awesome. He is Shawn Purdy. We can call him former minor league baseball player, but there's so much more to the Purdys and their family, and certainly everybody listening, and myself included, are going to be following along. And I can't wait to watch Iowa State football now this year, and all the games that Brock's going to play, and keeping an eye on Chubba, and certainly watching some Southeastern University softball. Shawn, it's been great to have you here on the show. Thanks so much for being as transparent and authentic in everything that you said. And listen, we wish you nothing but the best, and we'll do it again soon, hopefully.
Thank you. It's an honor, and God bless what you guys do. I think it's a great mix, and just continue to do it.
Great stuff there from Shawn Purdy, and just really appreciate him sharing about not only his journey, but also sharing about being a dad to 3 athletes who are doing pretty great things in their own respective ways, with Whitney as a softball player and Brock at Iowa State, and Chubba getting ready to figure out where he's going to go as a stud high school Arizona quarterback. So thanks to Shawn for being here on the podcast, the perfect Father's Day guest. And listen, I just want to wish all of you men out there who are dads, I know we have a lot of fathers that listen to this podcast. I want to wish you all a happy Father's Day. It's the most important job that I get to do every single day, and that is be a dad to my daughter. And just grateful to Shawn for coming on the podcast and sharing about being a dad to his family as well. Want to also thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. If this is the first time you've ever heard of Sports Spectrum, welcome to the program. Do me a favor, if you could, click that subscribe button on the app that you're listening to so you never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. It is a daily show. Every single day there's a new episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast coming out. And on Thursdays we do a throwback edition to bring you a little snippet of a previous episode from guests that we've had on in the past. So definitely subscribe and never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Also want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com, where there's all kinds of content there, including a daily devotional every morning at 6 a.m., content all day long, articles on the intersection of sports and faith, and every single podcast that we've ever done in the 2.5 years or so that we've been doing this podcast is right there and available at sportspectrum.com. You can also reach me directly. Jason@sportspectrum.com is my email, or on Twitter @Jason Romano. I'd love to hear from you, hear what you think about this episode of the podcast. And certainly if you have any future guest ideas of people you'd like to see us interview on this show, please reach out to me directly. I would love to know who you think we should be talking to here on the podcast. We've had so many interviews that have come through that form of communication, reaching out to me, hitting us up on Twitter, letting us know about some of the different people that are out there intersecting sports and faith, and boom, we have them on the show, and they have amazing stories to tell, much like Shawn Purdy did today. Thanks again so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day. Happy Father's Day to all the dads, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast.